emitted light. And we have a few additional parameters like distribution or efficiency that allow us to create special effects such as cookie cutters or control the mapping of the emission across the surface of the area light. And of course, playing the animation will once again confirm that the live viewer remains as interactive as possible even with complex lighting. The final aspect of lighting with Octane Render is called mesh emitters. Emission is a material-based effect that basically turns objects into light emitters. For this example, I would like to work with the yellow diffuse material. Double-click it to bring up the material editor. The first thing I would like to change is the color assigned to the diffuse channel. This step is entirely optional, so feel free to work with any color you like. Next, under the emission channel, we need to assign any of the emission shaders, either black body or texture emission. Let's work with black body. As soon as applied, the live viewer updates to reflect the newly introduced functionality. Let's open up the node and take a look at some of the parameters available. If you're paying close attention, you will notice that the options here closely resemble the ones we explored under the Octane Light tag. We still control the color of emitted light via a temperature parameter that works in kelvins. So if I bring this value down, we'll generate warm light. If I push it up, we'll work with cooler values. Power naturally controls the strength of the emission. So if I bring it down, the illumination will be decreased. Then we have a few secondary parameters, and the one that is worth mentioning is called texture. Here we can load a shader or an image that delivers grayscale data that will help us remap the strength of the emission across the surface of the object. So let's go ahead and assign, for example, a Octane checkerboard shader, and obviously the power needs to go down even further. And there we go. Wherever the checks shader delivers black, we can see the color under the diffuse channel, meaning there is no emission in that area. The parts that are white is where the temperature takes over and we are emitting light. Let's open up the checks shader and apply the UV transform shader to change the pattern a bit. For example, we can scale it up in X and probably reduce it in Y. Let's close the material editor, rewind, and play the animation. Before we move on to final rendering, let's take a quick look at some of the parameters available under the Octane camera tag. The setup requires a Cinema 4D camera and the Octane camera tag assigned to it. The parameters here have been organized under 5 major groups. We have motion blur with options that control the motion blur effect. Thin lens delivers f-stop, aperture, focal depth, autofocus, and a few secondary controls. The first 4 have the greatest impact on the depth of field effect. With camera imager, we can adjust exposure, gamma, vignetting, saturation, and so on. With post-processing, we are given the option to add a few post-processing effects, such as glow, bloom, glare, spectral shift, and a few others. And finally, stereo contains controls for stereoscopic rendering. The parameters under camera imager and post-processing are also available under Octane settings. The difference is that the parameters in the camera tag are considered local and only have an effect if the image is rendered through the camera the tag has been applied to, while these under Octane settings are considered global controls. So let's take a look at what happens if I adjust the exposure a bit. You can see the live viewer reacts accordingly. So let's set a value of 2 for example, and probably push the gamma up a bit, add some vignetting, and a small touch of saturation. Switch to the Post tab and enable the functionality. If I increase the bloom power, you can see the effect it has on the render. Let's set a value of 15 with glare power of 1. Close Octane settings, rewind, and play the animation. Finally, let's set up the engine for animation rendering in the picture viewer.